You really erased it? He asked, voice breaking like the first crack in porcelain. Not yet, I said. But I'm planning to, just like you told me to. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and regret. It was one of those quiet nights in Chicago where even the fluorescent lights seemed too tired to shine. I could still hear the echo of my own heartbeat through the stitches in my chest, the rhythm he'd once said was his favorite sound. Dr. Ethan Moore stood a few feet away, his white coat crisp, his expression colder than the hospital tiles beneath my feet. But his eyes, those same eyes that used to smile even before his lips did, refuse to meet mine. It had been 3 months since our accident. 3 months since the car crash that nearly took my life and ripped something irreparable between us. Ethan was the one who saved me on the operating table. The same hands that used to trace my face in the dark had held a scalpel that night, cutting me open to keep me alive. And maybe that's when he decided he couldn't love me anymore, when love became something clinical, sterile, something to be removed like a tumor. I'm your doctor now, Liam, he said the day I woke up, voice cold, surgical. Not your fiancé. You need to forget everything before this. But how do you forget someone who still shows up in your dreams, not as a memory, but as muscle memory? Every morning since, I'd traced the outline of our tattoo, 2 interlocking circles. One slightly faded, one still sharp. His was behind his wrist, mine just below my collarbone. He'd said it meant infinity. Now it just felt like irony. Tonight was supposed to be my final checkup before I left the hospital for good. I'd rehearsed what I'd say. Something simple, emotionless. Maybe thanks for everything, dear. More. But then he said those words again, erase it. And something inside me cracked open. You know, I said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. I thought love was supposed to heal. You, of all people, taught me that. His jaw tightened. Love doesn't heal, Liam. Medicine does. That should have been the end of it. But Ethan's voice trembled slightly when he said my name, and I caught the smallest flicker of something, pain, or maybe longing, before he turned away. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to ask why he still wore his ring on a chain under his shirt. I wanted to ask why he couldn't even look at me without his hands shaking. But instead, I did what I'd promised myself I wouldn't do. I pulled the ring off my finger and held it out. Here, I said quietly, you can have it back. You've already taken everything else. His hand reached out, slow, trembling, hesitant. When his fingers brushed mine, something electric passed between us. Something old and familiar and unbearably human. Then he froze. His eyes, usually so composed, went glassy, red-rimmed. The ring slipped from his grip, landing on the tile with a soft, metallic clink. Liam, he whispered, voice cracking. Don't do this. I smiled, but it wasn't real. You told me to move on. I didn't mean. He stopped himself, pressing his palm to his forehead as if trying to push back the emotion. I didn't mean for it to hurt like this. For a second, everything felt suspended, like the air had forgotten how to move. I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But 3 months of silence had taught me one thing. You can't force someone to stay in love with you, not even if they once promised forever. Goodbye, Dr. Moore, I said, turning toward the exit. His voice chased me down the hall, quiet but desperate. Liam, please. But I didn't turn around. Not this time. Outside, the city glowed faintly under the amber streetlights. I sat on the cold steps of the hospital, the ring still heavy in my pocket. My chest ached where the stitches were healing, and maybe it wasn't just the surgery. Maybe love leaves scars too, ones no doctor can fix. That night, I took a cab to the tattoo parlor on Wabash Avenue. It was the same one we'd gone to after he proposed, laughing like idiots as the ink burned into our skin. The artist recognized me. He looked at my bandaged chest and hesitated. Erase or cover? He asked softly. I looked at the faint outline of the circles and thought of Ethan's trembling hand, his eyes red and wet under the sterile lights. Neither, I said finally. Just add something. He nodded. What do you want? Make it look unfinished, I said, like it's still waiting for something. The next morning, I woke up to a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, Ethan was there, still in his scrubs, dark circles under his eyes, his hair a mess. He looked nothing like the composed doctor I'd seen last night. "You didn't answer my calls," he said, breathless. I didn't think there was anything left to say. He stepped forward, his voice low and rough. "There's everything left to say, Liam." I wanted to slam the door, but his eyes, they had that look again. The one that said he hadn't slept, that he'd been fighting with himself all night. He looked at my collarbone. "You didn't erase it." "No," I said. "I couldn't." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The morning light spilled across his face, catching on the faint trace of tears still drying on his cheeks. "I thought walking away would make you safer," he whispered. "After the crash, I couldn't bear the thought of losing you again. I thought if I kept my distance, if I made you hate me, it'd be easier." "That's bullshit, Ethan," I said, my voice shaking. "You don't protect someone by breaking them." He flinched. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and shining, my ring. "I couldn't let it go," he said, his hand trembling again. "Every time I looked at it, I remembered the sound of your heartbeat on that monitor. I remember thinking, if it stops, so do I." I felt something twist painfully in my chest. He looked up, eyes wet but steady. "I love you, Liam." I never stopped. For a long time, I just stood there. The city outside was waking up, car horns, footsteps, life resuming as if nothing had changed. But inside that small apartment, time felt different. Ethan reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. His fingers were warm, trembling slightly as they closed around mine, the same hands that had once saved my life. "I don't know if we can go back," I said quietly. "I don't want to go back," he said. "I just want to go forward. With you." Something in me, the part that had been waiting, hoping, breaking, finally exhaled. I pressed my forehead against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath his scrubs. For the first time since the accident, it didn't hurt. Not completely. That night, as we sat together on my small couch, his fingers traced the new lines of my tattoo, the open, unfinished circle. He smiled softly. "You didn't finish it." "I was waiting for you," I said. He kissed me, then slow, uncertain, but real. The kind of kiss that says, "I'm here, I'm sorry, I'm still yours." Outside, the city hummed with life, but in that small space between us, there was only silence, the good kind, the kind that feels like healing. And when I closed my eyes, I realized maybe some love stories aren't meant to be erased. Maybe they're just meant to be rewritten. The next few days were strange, too quiet, too calm, like the world was holding its breath around us. Ethan started coming by after his shifts, still in his scrubs, smelling faintly of coffee and antiseptic. He'd sit on the edge of my couch, half talking, half silent, as if afraid that if he spoke too much, everything might collapse again. And maybe it would. We were both pretending that everything was fine, that love could simply be resumed, like a movie paused mid-scene. But there was a fracture under the surface, a thin crack that neither of us wanted to touch. One night, he found me sitting by the window, tracing the outline of my tattoo again. The streetlights painted our faces in soft gold and shadow. "Does it still hurt?" he asked. "Which part?" I said, forcing a smile. "The surgery, or the rest of it?" He walked closer, crouched in front of me, and took my hand gently. "Both." I looked down at our joined hands, his skin slightly rough from years of work, mine pale and healing. "The pain's different now," I said. "It's quieter, like it's learned to live here." He nodded slowly, then leaned his forehead against my knee. "I wish I could take it away." I brushed his hair back, feeling that familiar tug in my chest. "You already did once, Ethan. But maybe some pain isn't supposed to go." He looked up at me then, eyes so vulnerable that I almost forgot how to breathe. That was the night we kissed again, not the desperate kind that demands something, but the soft, searching kind, like two people relearning how to speak after years of silence. When I woke up the next morning, he was still there, asleep on the couch, his hand resting lightly over my heart. I remember thinking, maybe we're getting better, maybe we're healing, but healing is never that simple. A week later, Ethan was called in for a high-profile surgery, a heart transplant for a senator's daughter. It was the kind of operation that could define his career, and I knew how much it meant to him. "Promise me you'll eat something while I'm gone," he said before leaving, tying his surgical mask loosely around his neck. I grinned. "You make it sound like you're going off to war." He smiled back, but there was worry in his eyes. "It's the same thing sometimes." I watched him go, the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall. The apartment felt colder without him, emptier, like something essential had been unplugged. Hours passed. I tried reading, cleaning, anything to keep my mind off him, but every time my phone buzzed, my stomach flipped. When he finally called, his voice was hoarse, tired, but filled with relief. "It's done. She's stable." "You did it," I said, smiling even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah," he breathed, "but I kept thinking of you." Every time her heart started to falter, he stopped. "What?" I asked. "Never mind," he said softly. "I'll tell you when I get home." But that night, Ethan didn't come home. I waited until dawn, the city still wrapped in fog. When my phone finally rang, it wasn't him, it was the hospital. "Mr. Gray," a woman's voice said. "Dr. Moore was involved in a medical emergency. He's fine, but he's been admitted for observation. We suggest you come in." My blood turned to ice. What happened? There was a complication during the surgery. A needle prick. They're just running tests. A needle prick. That's what they called it. But when I arrived, I saw the truth. Ethan sitting on a hospital bed, pale, shaking, and 4 in his arm. He looked up when he saw me. "Hey," he said, trying to smile. "Guess I'm on the other side now." I rushed to him, my chest tightening. "You said you were fine." "I am," he insisted weakly. "It's just protocol. One of the instruments slipped. It happens." But I saw the fear in his eyes. The patient he'd operated on, the senator's daughter, had an undiagnosed infection. Bloodborne. Dangerous. Ethan had been exposed. "You should have told me," I whispered, sitting beside him. He sighed. "I didn't want to worry you." "Ethan, you're the one who worries about everyone else. Who's supposed to worry about you?" He chuckled softly, voice breaking. "I guess that's your job now." I wanted to hold him, to make it better, but all I could do was sit there, my fingers tangled with his. The silence between us said everything: the fear, the uncertainty, the fragile hope. He was kept overnight for observation. I stayed by his bedside, half asleep in the uncomfortable hospital chair, my head resting on the mattress. Sometime around 3 a.m., I felt his hand move to my hair, slow and tender. "Liam," he murmured. "If something happens," I sat up sharply. Don't say that. Just listen," he said, his voice steady but soft. "If something ever happens to me, promise you'll keep living. Promise me you won't disappear again." My throat tightened. "Nothing's going to happen to you." He smiled faintly. "That's not how life works. You should know that better than anyone." The tears came before I could stop them. I grabbed his hand and pressed it to my chest. "Then you promise me something too. Promise you'll fight, no matter what they tell you." His hand trembled slightly, but he nodded. "Always." The tests came back the next day. Negative. He was fine. When the doctor gave us the results, I swear I almost collapsed from relief. Ethan just smiled weakly and said, "Guess I still have some luck left." That night, we walked home together, the cold wind biting through our coats. He slipped his hand into mine, fingers cold but sure. "You know," he said softly, "when I thought I might be sick, I realized something." "What?" "That I'd wasted too much time trying to protect you from me. I stopped walking. You were never the danger, Ethan. You were the cure." He laughed under his breath, shaking his head. "You always did know how to ruin a perfectly dramatic moment." I smiled. "You love that about me." He didn't deny it. Life slowly fell into rhythm after that, shared mornings, late dinners, quiet laughter in between. Ethan started taking fewer overnight shifts, saying the hospital could survive without him once in a while. We cooked together, argued about movies, and spent too many nights watching the city lights blur from our window. But even as things began to heal, something new started growing inside me, a quiet fear. I was terrified that this peace was temporary, that love like ours couldn't possibly last. Maybe it was the way Ethan looked at me sometimes, like he was memorizing me again, as if afraid he'd have to let go. One evening, as we sat on the balcony wrapped in blankets, I asked him, "Do you ever think about the accident?" He nodded slowly. "Every day. It changed everything. For better or worse?" He turned to me, eyes glinting with the city lights. "Both. It broke me in ways I didn't know I could break. But it also showed me what mattered." I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. "And what's that?" He smiled faintly. "You." The next morning, I found a small box on the kitchen counter. Inside was a thin silver band, not the old engagement ring, but something new. When I looked up, Ethan was leaning against the doorway, nervous. "I know it's too soon," he said quickly, "but I wanted a new beginning, something that isn't tainted by what happened." My throat felt tight again. "You're serious?" "Terrified, actually," he admitted. "But yeah." I laughed through the tears. "You're proposing to me while I'm still wearing pajamas and holding a cup of coffee?" He grinned. "Seems fitting for us, doesn't it?" I slipped the ring on, feeling the cool metal against my skin. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. He took my hand and pressed a kiss to my knuckles. "This time," he whispered, "we finish what we started." That night, I dreamt of our tattoos again, the circles, the unbroken lines, the symbol that once meant forever. Only now it didn't hurt to look at it. I woke up before dawn, the city still quiet, Ethan asleep beside me. The ring glinted softly in the dim light, and I realized that maybe love isn't about erasing the scars, it's about learning to live inside them. But deep down, a voice whispered peace never lasts forever. And somewhere, beneath all the warmth, I could feel it, the quiet hum of something coming. Something that would test us again. The quiet didn't last. It never does. 2 months after the new ring slipped onto my finger, the universe decided to test how much love we could survive this time. It began with something small, Ethan missing dinner one night. Then another. His phone buzzed constantly, but he rarely answered in front of me. I told myself it was just work, that old habits die hard. But the more I told myself that, the less I believed it. Then came the call. "Liam, this is Nurse Hopkins," said the voice over the line, her tone gentle, too gentle. "Dr. Moore collapsed during surgery. He's stable now, but you should come." For a moment, everything around me froze, the sound of traffic, the hum of the refrigerator, even the air itself. Then I was running out the door, down the street, into the cold Chicago night that cut like glass against my lungs. When I reached the hospital, he was already awake, sitting up in the bed with that stubborn, tired smile he always wore when he wanted to make me believe everything was fine. "I told you I'm okay," he said as soon as I entered, his voice raspy. "You fainted in the or Ethan." "Low blood sugar," he said. "Nothing serious." But I saw the way his hand shook when he tried to pick up the cup of water. I saw the faint pallor under his skin, the dark circles etched deep beneath his eyes. "Don't lie to me," I whispered. He sighed, setting the cup down. "It's not serious, just exhaustion. I've been working too much again." "That's what you said before the crash," I said sharply, and immediately regretted it. He flinched, the ghost of pain flickering in his eyes. Then he smiled again, but it didn't reach his lips. "I promise, I'll take a few days off." "Promise," I said, voice cracking. "I swear." But promises are fragile things, they break easier than bones. For a while, things returned to a strange rhythm. He did take a few days off, and we spent them curled up on the couch, binge-watching old sitcoms, pretending that love was enough to keep reality away. But sometimes, I'd catch him staring off into space, hand pressed against his chest as if feeling for something that wasn't there. When I asked what was wrong, he'd just say, "Nothing, love," and kiss the question away. Until the night I found the medical reports. They were tucked inside a folder in his desk, half hidden beneath bills and journal articles. At first, I wasn't looking for them, I was trying to find his charger. But then I saw my name on the top of one page and below it, his, and there it was. The test result he'd told me was negative. It wasn't. My hands went numb. The words swam in front of my eyes: possible viral exposure, elevated markers, follow-up required. When he came home that evening, I was still sitting on the couch, the folder open in my lap. "Liam," he said softly, eyes widening. "You lied to me." He froze in the doorway. "I was going to tell you." "When?" I snapped. "When it was too late. When you started getting worse." He stepped forward, voice trembling. "I didn't want to scare you. I thought it was a false positive. It still might be." I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "You promised me, Ethan. You promised." He sank to his knees in front of me, grabbing my hands. "I didn't want you to live in fear. I didn't want to lose you again." "But you already were losing me," I said. "Every time you hid something, every time you smiled instead of telling the truth." He pressed his forehead against my knees, his voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting you." "You keep saying that," I whispered. "But love isn't protection. It's honesty. It's choosing to stay even when it hurts." He lifted his head, eyes red and wet. "Then stay," he pleaded. "Even now." And I did. Because love, no matter how broken, still finds a way to anchor itself to the heart. The weeks that followed were quiet, heavy, but different. Ethan went through treatment and testing, his body growing weaker before it grew stronger. I stayed by his side, reading to him when he couldn't sleep, making soup he'd barely touch, pretending not to notice when his hands trembled. Sometimes we'd sit in silence for hours, saying nothing, just existing in the same small space. One night, he looked at me and said softly, "You should leave before this gets worse." I laughed bitterly. "That's your idea of romance?" He smiled faintly. "It's my idea of mercy." I took his hand. "I'm not leaving you, Ethan. Not this time. Not ever." He squeezed my fingers weakly, eyes glistening. "You always were the brave one." "No," I said. "Just the stubborn one." We both laughed, then a small, broken sound that felt like breathing again. By spring, he started to recover. Slowly, painfully, like the world was giving him back one heartbeat at a time. The test results turned stable. His color returned. He began walking again, his strength rebuilding, and for the first time in months, I saw the light in his eyes that I thought had vanished forever. We celebrated with cheap champagne and takeout Chinese food, sitting on the floor of our apartment. "To bad luck and second chances," he said, raising his glass. "To surviving love," I added. He laughed. "Same thing." It was almost midnight when he suddenly said, "Come with me." "To where?" "You'll see." He led me outside, down the quiet streets until we reached the tattoo parlor on Wabash Avenue, the same one we'd been to before. The lights were still on. The artist smiled when he saw us. "You two again?" Ethan nodded. "We've got something to finish." He turned to me, his eyes soft. "You said you wanted the circle to stay open, remember? Unfinished." "Yeah." He took my hand. "Let's finish it together this time." The artist nodded and started working, the buzz of the needle filling the small room. I watched as the ink traced new lines into our skin, two circles, interlocked, now closed, complete. When it was done, Ethan looked at mine, then his, and whispered, "There. Now it's forever again." I smiled, tears in my eyes. "Forever's a big word." "I know," he said, "but I think we've earned it." Months passed. Seasons changed. The world outside kept spinning, but inside our little apartment, time felt like something gentle, something kind. Ethan went back to work, fewer hours, slower pace. I started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. Sometimes, I'd read him drafts of my stories while he cooked, pretending to critique my metaphors while burning the eggs. We built a life again, not perfect, not without scars, but real. And then one morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of him humming in the kitchen. The light streamed through the curtains, painting everything gold. He turned when he saw me. "Morning, sleepyhead." I smiled, wrapping my arms around his waist from behind. "You're in a good mood. Maybe because I'm alive," he said lightly, kissing my forehead. "And because I'm with you." A few weeks later, on the anniversary of my surgery, we went back to that hospital courtyard, the same one where everything had fallen apart. The air was cool, the trees dressed in early summer green. We sat on the same bench where I'd once given him the ring back. Now the ring shone again on my hand. He reached out, tracing the tattoo visible under my collar. "It's strange," he said quietly. "The way we both survived the worst parts of each other. Maybe that's what love really is," I said. "Not the fireworks, just the staying." He smiled. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," I said, "but you make it worth it." For a long while, we just sat there, listening to the wind, the faint hum of traffic, the steady rhythm of two hearts that had been through too much but were still beating together. Then Ethan stood, pulling me with him. "Dance with me," he said suddenly. "Here." I laughed. "There's no music." He smiled. "There's always music." And maybe there was the whisper of the leaves, the distant city hum, the sound of laughter from a nurse passing by. He placed his hand on my waist, and I placed mine on his shoulder, and under the golden light of the late afternoon, we danced slow, clumsy, completely free. When he leaned in, whispering, "I love you," against my neck, I realized that sometimes love doesn't need to be loud or grand. Sometimes it's just two people choosing each other again and again, even after everything. Later that night, as we lay together, I traced the tattoo on his wrist. "You think it'll still mean forever this time?" I asked. He smiled in the dark. "It already does." I pressed my forehead to his, feeling his breath mingle with mine. "Then I guess I can finally stop running." "Good," he whispered, "because I'm not letting go again." And for once I believed him. Completely. Outside, rain began to fall softly against the windows, washing the city clean. Inside, our world was small, quiet, and whole, two hearts, one promise, and the endless hum of love that refused to die. The kind of love that doesn't fade, doesn't forget, and doesn't end even after the last surgery, the last scar, the last goodbye. Because sometimes the real miracle isn't survival, it's staying. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.